Scary story number one, The Little Hands. Now, I've never lived in a haunted house, but my mother did as a teen, writes Reddit user Patented Spacehook. Recounting a true event, other houses on her street had strange things going on too. A few homes away from her lived a family, and one night the daughter went to bed with a bad headache, and the next day she was dead. She'd passed away from an aneurysm. After her funeral, the family went away to get their minds off the tragedy, and the father asked my uncle, my mom's brother, to check on their pets. Now, my mom and dad, who were dating at the time, went with him. My mother had heard that there was a grand piano and she wanted to play it. My dad was studying to be a veterinarian. Now, after entering the house, my uncle and my father headed to the basement to see if there was anything they could do for the animals. And my mother went to the piano on the ground floor. She was playing it, and then all of a sudden she felt something brush her ankles. She thought a cat must have left the basement and walked past her. And she kept playing, and then she felt it again. She looked under the piano and saw nothing. When she started again, she felt hands clasped tightly around her legs. She dashed to the basement door and called my uncle and father and waited for them. Back outside, my uncle could tell my mom was rattled and asked what was wrong. She told him what had happened, and he turned solid white as a sheet. He told her the daughter who had died used to play a game with her father. When he played the piano, she'd crawl underneath, grab his ankle, and push his feet up and down on the pedals. The Phantom Patient. The ambulance company that I used to work for had a haunted ambulance rig. A lot of EMTs had stories about it, but I never put much stock into paranormal. That is until I had my own experience with rig number 12. My partner and I was in a rural community at 3 a.m., and it was pitch dark and completely quiet. We were both dozing, and I was in the driver's seat, and she was in the passenger seat, and I woke up to a muffled voice, but I thought it was my partner talking. I told her I was trying to sleep, and I closed my eyes. I distinctly heard a male voice say, "Oh my God, I'm dying," followed by a few seconds of heavy breathing. My partner and I sat straight up and looked back into the patient compartment where it sounded like the voice had came from. Things were quiet for a couple seconds, and then we heard the click of an oxygen bottle regulator and a hiss as if it was leaking. I turned on the lights and we ran out of the rig. I thought a transient might have climbed in while we were asleep. So we opened the rear doors. No one was there. And I checked the oxygen bottles. None was open. We didn't sleep much after that. Scary story number 3. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom, and I saw something very strange. A wooden board which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space lay fractured in two pieces on the ground. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear that, man, someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed the pictures to the landlord asking if anyone had been there with a kind of an undertone of annoyance, since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you're able to." I called and she explained her last two tenants had said they'd had the same thing happen. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands all over me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. And there's no way an animal could make that sound. After about 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked to the bathroom. And that's when I first saw the new board cover and the hole was broke into. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but I heard something else. Whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices. I could hear one sentence repeated over and over and over. It's your turn. It's your turn. I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and it was dark outside. And I watched TV to try to unwind. And then my fuse blew. My pet Buzzy Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night. But he started squawking like he was being strangled. And I never heard him make noise like this before. He was screaming. And I grabbed my car keys and I ran out, sat in my car, and waited until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs that morning, that comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. And I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him, dried him, and I was confused. Around 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Oh, wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in the apartment for another, about 18 months, and I heard the whispering on a few other occasions, and twice the board covering and the hole in the ceiling broke and got moved again. And I live somewhere else now. And she said her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on, but forget it. It's their problem now. Scary story number 4. The boy with no eyes. One night when I was 10 years old, I was woke up by my bedroom door opening, followed by someone sitting on my bed. I thought at first it may have been my mom, but it was not my mom. I found an eyeless boy. He had black, empty sockets. He was about my age, sitting at the foot of my bed. He extended his hand, and in it was a little box. I was startled, but reached out. He pulled back. I reached again, and he said, "Give it. Give it." Then I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, he was gone. But I could still see the imprint where he'd sat on my bed. Fast forward 5 years. My girlfriend came over to do some homework. After she finished, she took a little nap while she waited for her parents. And when they arrived, I tried waking her up. And she opened her eyes and suddenly looking up at the corner in the wall where the wall met the ceiling, and she kept pointing and went back to sleep. I shook her again. She came back to full consciousness. And I explained what she'd done. She looked haunted. Up on the wall, I saw a little boy. No eyes. He was there, kind of in a Spider-Man pose, just staring at me. I freaked out, and I told her about my story. Now, fast forward another 5 years, and I was with the same girlfriend, and we had a 2-year-old. We were living in my parents' house, in my old room, and my daughter started waking up at the same time every night, and she talked to someone. After a little while, I noticed almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her, "Who are you talking to?" She said, "It's a little boy. He's nice. And he's looking for his mommy." My daughter's nightly conversations continued until we got her own place later that year. Scary story number 5. This haunting happened in 1972 at a party hosted by University of Michigan students living on Ashley Street. A 15-year-old girl who probably had no business being there in the first place suddenly felt a strange, bone-chilling cold, according to the Michigan Daily. In an attempt to warm up, she went upstairs because heat rises, well, we guess. That's when things got really really strange. One of the walls of the house started moving, and a black shadow approached the girl. Meanwhile, downstairs, posters were spontaneously popping off the walls and falling into a growing pile on the floor. The girl wandered back downstairs, where she found herself saying these strange words. The drugs and addiction were my fault, and I accept responsibility for that. But I was not that way deep inside. I wanted to apologize to everyone involved for what I've done. What made those words even stranger was the girl didn't do drugs, let alone have an addiction. The words didn't seem all that strange to the students who lived in the house before they moved in. The house had been inhabited by a man with a very serious addiction. The reason he no longer lived there is he had died from a heroin overdose. Has the ghost of Ashley Street made any more appearances? We'll never know. Remains a mystery.